Scrivener and its user interface sometimes get a bad rap for being complex, and I'll admit it's a reputation it somewhat deserves. But what if I told you you could streamline Scrivener and go from this to this? It's too bad that Scrivener's complexity can lead to users bouncing off the tool or having the complexity of the interface get in the way of their productivity. One way you can combat that is through the full screen mode, but we're often not in that mode. We're organizing our short stories, novels, or screenplays, and the interface is just staring at us in all its complex glory, slowly chipping away at our productivity. And that's why in this video, I'm going to show you how to make Scrivener as simple as possible. I'll also spend some time on full screen mode and composition mode, both of which can be streamlined as well, so stick around. Hey, if you're new to the channel, I'm Brad Beaulieu, and I'm a full-time fantasy and science fiction author with a dozen novels, tons of short stories, and 20 plus years of experience in the field of writing. I started a novel approach to share some of the hard-learned lessons I've learned about writing, editing, publishing, and the business of writing. If any of that sounds up your alley, be sure to subscribe, and if you find this video useful, I hope you'll like, share, and maybe even buy me a coffee on coffee.com. Link in the description below. Okay, so the way that I'm going to work this is I'm going to start with kind of a typical view of what Scrivener might look like for you, at least it does for me. And I think these are fairly standard options for what's available on the interface. And then I'll slowly simplify that option by option until we get to that really streamlined interface I showed you in the opening. And I'll spend some time on each of them along the way so you can understand why you might want to have them on your interface and why you might want to get rid of them, and some of the options that you have as well for each. So here is a project I've been using on a number of different videos. There's the binder over on the left side with collections. There's the inspector over on the right-hand side. I currently have two editors open as well, and they both have rulers up. They both have headers and footers at the bottom. Those are separate things that we can turn off. It has as well a formatting bar, a tab bar right above that, and then the toolbar finally at the very top. So let's start with the simplest. We can get rid of course, the collections and the binder itself. The collections you may or may not use, and so you may want to get rid of that, or just get rid of it temporarily while you're not using them. And then you can hide the binder as well. Just click on that, hide binder. And so we're part way to simplifying this interface. We can also, of course, get rid of the inspector with this button over on the upper right in the toolbar. So click that, and now we're getting a little bit more streamlined. While these are up though, let me just bring them back temporarily. Let me show you one thing. You may want to change the fonts in each of these areas, and you can do that under Scrivener settings. In the settings panel, if we go to appearance, we see the general interface has a number of options. If we go to the binder, the next one down, it has fonts. And so you can use whatever fonts you have on your system. And I mention this just because sometimes they can get a bit big and maybe you want to shrink them so you can see more on the left-hand side there. So if I change this to say a 12-point font, that would shrink quite a bit. If that works for you, great. Or if they're too small, if they're just not readable at all times, you can make them a bit larger. So click on that and they get bigger and you can read them more easily in the binder. If you scroll down through these, you'll see other ones have fonts as well. So just keep an eye in the central area. So go to composition, there isn't one. Corkboard does have one, so you can change those for the corkboard. Full screen doesn't, index cards do. So you can just scroll down through here and find the ones that have fonts and change those to suit your style and the size, readability, that sort of thing. All right, let me just get rid of the binder and the inspector again. I recently covered in my last video some details about how to customize the toolbar, and you can certainly do that. One option you have, though, if you right-click on there, is to make these monochrome. So if they're drawing a little too much attention to themselves, you can make them monochrome. So that just simplifies that slightly. You may also have icon and text on yours, but you don't have to keep it that way. You can right-click and just make that icon only if you want. And if you don't want to see the toolbar at all at different times, you can go under View, Hide Toolbar. So now we're getting pretty streamlined at this point. We still have a ways to go to get to that other interface. Now let me touch on this next one down. This is the tab bar. One of the reasons I like making these videos is because it forces me to look pretty deeply into Scrivener's functionality. And I actually didn't know this existed before starting to research this particular video. So this tab bar is a browser-style capability that allows you to have multiple editors up in the same instance of Scrivener, the same window. I'm looking at my Countless Guises project. I have the Dragons of Deepwood Fen up on the right side. And just like the editors down here have different contexts, they keep track of things like whether or not there's a ruler, the zoom level on each of those. These also have context. They remember what's included in them. So let me just click on the Deepwood Fen one, and the interface changes. In that instance of Scrivener, in that project open in that other tab, I have the binder open, the collections open, and the inspector open. If I just click back over here, they go away because they're not open in that particular instance. So just keep that in mind as you're navigating this tab bar. So I mentioned I didn't realize this was available, and I'll show you why. So if I get rid of the Deepwood Fen one, it closes that project. Now I'm back here. And let me just get back to how I had my interface. So I had show tab bar, and so it had this available. And let me actually bring the toolbar back up too. So this was kind of my standard interface. I had Countless Guises here and this tab bar that I didn't know existed, and I had that repeated up on top as well. And as I started looking at this, I'm like, well, what is this thing for? If you have multiple instances up of Scrivener, you can merge them together. If we go under Window, you can see at the bottom, I do have 2 instances up, but they're not merged currently. I can go to Merge All Windows, and that will bring them together into the same interface, 1 tab each. So now again, if I click on this one, this simplified version, it just shows the context for that one as I've set it up. That was the simplified version I showed you earlier. If I come back to this one, it'll show all the currently displayed options that I've chosen for the interface for that project that's being shown in Scrivener in that tab. So if you don't currently have those tabs up, you can look under Window and you can merge those together. So merge all windows. Once you've done that, you can see show previous tab, show next tab, and move tab to new window. So that's kind of taking it out of that tab bar and making it its own window again. So if I did that for this one, I would now have 2 instances again separate from each other. So they're kind of ignoring the tab bar at this point. Now, one more thing you might want to be aware of is that new projects, when they're opened on the Mac anyway, won't by default add to that tab bar. So if I navigate to a folder that has other projects in it, and for example, double click on one to open it, see that it opens up in its own window again. It did not go into that tab bar. And on the Mac, that is under your desktop and dock settings. If you scroll down to Windows, you'll see this first one is Prefer Tabs when opening documents. And I have mine set to in full screen mode. And so if I'm in full screen, then it will do that, but otherwise it won't. And so I can click here and say, I could say never, but we want always. So click always, and I'll go back to that folder and I'll double click on this again. And now see that it opens up in this tab bar. So you can set that on the Mac so that'll open up automatically if that's your desired functionality. Early research shows that Windows doesn't have an equivalent. I think you might have to do a merge in that case on Windows. You might have to play around with that a bit to get that to work. Okay, so that's a useful bit of functionality if you use it. If you don't, you can get rid of that. So again, here I have my tab bar. I can go under View and then Hide Tab Bar. That'll just get rid of that. So yet one more thing gone. We're gaining more and more vertical real estate as we move along. Okay, and then let's come to the text editors themselves. First of all, you can have dual or single editors. So if you have 2 currently, you can click on this icon right here and it'll go to single. You can then click on this icon right here and it'll go back to dual. And by the way, this can be either split vertically or horizontally. Some people, especially if you have a tall monitor, if you have one that's turned 90 degrees on its side, so you use more real estate up and down, you can switch it. So if you go under View Editor Layout, you can split horizontally instead of vertically. So if I click that, these will switch, and it's a little bit ugly right now because again, I have kind of a wide, not tall monitor, and so this may not be quite as useful if you don't have a lot of vertical real estate, but if you do, it's there for you. So you can split them up that way, and just like you can horizontally, you can move these up and down. Okay, so that's really bugging me. Let me go back to the vertical split here. Okay, so again, it does remember what each of these has in terms of like the ruler, the header, and the footer. So if I come over here and I hit Command R or go under View, Text Editing, Show or Hide the Ruler, that is different and distinct from this other one. But let me just go to a single mode here. So what I'm talking about next will apply to either of the editors, depending on which one you're looking at. You have these options for both. So I've gotten rid of the ruler, so we can do that. We can also get rid of this formatting bar. If I go under View, Text Editing, I can hide that format bar. So again, I've gained a bit more space. And then all we have left within the text editor view is the header and the footer. So the header has different functionality, again, like browser style functionality where you can go back, you can hold this down and go far back if you want, or you can go one by one. And you can go forward, same deal. It keeps a list of the things that you've had, the history of that particular editor. And so you can go one by one or click and hold and then jump forward. You can also right click in this area and do a number of things. You can reveal where this is in the binder or in the collection. You can see the path in the binder. You can go to other documents. But if you don't need this, and there is some functionality over here as well, you can jump to different scrivenings within the scrivening view. You can go up and down in this set of scrivenings, and you can change your editor layout. But again, if you don't need that, you can go under the View, Editor Layout, Hide Header View. So that'll get rid of that top one. And then same deal at the bottom, there's functionality down here too. You have the words in the current set of scrivenings. And also if you click and drag, it will change that and it'll show you your selection and how many words or characters, depending on your settings, you have in that selection. It has the zoom level as well. So there are some presets and you can also change it to some other specific value. And then on the bottom right, there's this toggle include in compile. So you have that available in the compile view, you have it available in the inspector, but if you very quickly want to include or exclude something in your next compile, you can just click down here. And so if I do that, we see that it changes from a little check mark to a little X down there. But again, if I'm trying to stay streamlined and I don't want that, I can go under View, Editor Layout, Hide Footer View. So now we're pretty streamlined again. All I have left is the toolbar. And so if I want, I can get rid of that too. So hide the toolbar. So here we are at that really streamlined interface. So from here, if you want it even more streamlined, you have two choices. If you go under View, you can go into full screen or composition mode. Full screen mode I can get to here if I want, but also by clicking this button here or the equivalent on Windows. And when I do, it goes in, it takes up the entire real estate of that screen. It gets rid of the window treatment and the menu bar and the task bar as well. So it's just totally focused on that particular document. And if I need it, of course, I can push up here and then I have my menus back. And then once I go down, it just goes away. I'll get to the composition mode in just a minute, but let me show you some other options here. If I bring this back to kind of regular mode, and let's say I have the toolbar, that's pretty useful, and so you may not want to get rid of that most times. But there is an option for this. If you go under Scrivener Settings, and if we go under the Appearance and then Full Screen, there's a couple of interesting options. So you can hide the binder and inspector when entering full screen mode, and you can also slide in binder and inspector when hidden. I'll come back to this one in just 1 second. So let me try this. I'm going to bring back the binder, and I'll bring back the inspector. And now if I go to full screen mode, it got rid of those for me. So they're gone. So if you have a mode where you want your interface most times, but when you go to full screen mode, you want it to simplify automatically, you can check those options. Now let me come back out here and see that the binder and the inspector come back. So again, you can flip back and forth and simplify to a great degree your interface, and then when you come back, you might be flipping around and navigating through different things or using the inspector for whatever reason, and then when you go back to full screen mode, it gets rid of those. Again, we have those options set to get rid of the toolbar, the binder, and the inspector, so they're all gone. But I do have the option as well to slide in. So if I go all the way to the right here, it does bring that up and I can navigate as needed. So I can do that quickly, I can bring it back, I could even do like a range of these if I want to. Come back here and it slides away. And then the inspector, same deal. If I slide over here, it shows the inspector. I can come to the metadata tab or the synopsis and notes tab or what have you, comments. And then when I'm done doing whatever I'm doing, come back here and it just goes away. So that's a really nice feature of the full screen mode versus composition mode. All right, but let me show you that last option. So if I go to Scrivener settings and I say always auto hide toolbar in full screen mode. So if I check that, come back out. Now, if I go to full screen mode, it gets rid of the binder, the inspector, and the toolbar. So now I'm super streamlined. This is actually quite like the composition mode. So let me touch on that really quickly. So if I go into composition mode, it has some different functionality than the full screen mode does. So I'll just click on that. And it actually looks quite similar in this case, but I can choose some things here. Things like the zoom level. Now I can do that on the other mode before I go into that mode, but I can do it here dynamically. And again, I can change it to some specific value. I can also easily change the paper position, left, right, center. Also the paper width, that just changes dynamically as I move that around. And then I have some other options. Let me show you this one on the right here. So that background can fade if you want. So if you want to see things just a little bit in the background, you can. So if you have something for, say, work purposes or personal purposes where you want to see something behind this window, you can. I tried that for a while, but I tend to like this completely blanked out. That helps me focus a little bit more. And then we can also have the inspector up or not. And this is just a hovering window. You have access to the different mini tabs that are available in the inspector, but it's in a different format. So up here we see comments and footnotes. I can switch to keywords or synopsis and notes or custom metadata or what have you. So those are still available. It's just presented in a different way, kind of a simplified way. You also have the availability to jump around with this go-to if you have different scrivenings up. The focus mode I won't cover greatly, but you can play with this as well. You can have it on line, sentence, or paragraph, and it just changes how things look. They'll be highlighted and grayed out in different ways depending on if you want to focus on the line you're on, the sentence you're on, or the paragraph you're on. Typewriter mode snaps things to the center, and you have options for where it snaps to. You can have lower third, lower quarter, upper quarter, I think is the options. And then the keywords is very similar to the inspector. It's a floating window. If you really need this, you could have one on the right, one on the left. You could change your paper width so they're not overlapping your writing. But if you don't need it, you can just get rid of it. So the composition mode just has a slightly different feel for it. You can mimic the functionality in full screen mode as compared to composition mode and just try them both out. See which one works better for you. But it's great to have both options. And then I mentioned I was going to show some of the features that aren't maybe normally used, but that you can use, but they add to the complexity, but there may be specific purposes for them and they're useful at times. So let me show you a couple of those. So first of all, the default view for the editors in this scrivenings mode is to just have one big long scroll. But you can have a page view a la Word. So let me go under View and then Text Editing, and I can have this page view. And again, look for keyboard shortcuts, use them if that's kind of your style, but they're usually listed on the right-hand side. And so I'll go to Page View. And so this changes how it looks. It has dividers where the pages will be. How does it decide what those pages are, like how big they are? That's described under the Scrivener settings. And if we go to Appearance and then Page View, we can optionally show page view in new projects. So new ones that are created automatically switch to the page view. So if that's your default view, you might want to check that. And then use phasing pages. So 2 pages, I'll show you that in 1 second. But you can have that as the default in new projects as well. You can center or not. And you can see that moving in the background. And then show margin guides. So that'll show the margins around which the text is being limited, defined by the left and right margins, top and bottom margins, the header and the footer, etc. And then there's this draw shadow around pages. So this has this kind of like shadowy view around the edges. I can get rid of that and just have like a margin around that as well, if that's better for you aesthetically. I can also change the number of pixels. So if I change this to 10 pixels, for example, it just shrinks the space between the pages. And then finally, the page size can be defined in one of 2 ways. either under Scrivener's File, Page Setup Settings, or from the compile settings. The compile, if you're compiling a PDF, for example, you can define the page size, the margins, and that sort of thing. So it can use that, or we can go under File, Page Setup Settings. So I'll keep it there, and then I'll do that. I'll go under File, and I have to get out of this window first. I can't have both of these up at the same time. So I'll get rid of this window, go under File, and then Page Setup. So here I can see that it's formatting for any printer. It's currently set to US letter. You might have it legal. There are different ones for the UK sizes. So you have that option to change what the page size is. And then if you want a side-by-side view, if you have a lot of horizontal real estate, you can go under View, Text Editing, 2 pages across. Let me bring back my footer so we can shrink this down a little bit. So I'll go under the Editor Layout, Show the Footer View, and then I have access to my zoom level. I'll go to 90% here. We can see that it shows both pages left and right. So this is more of a proper publishing tool style layout. Now, Scrivener is by no means a decent layout tool, but you can at least see what it might look like depending upon the page settings. So if that's more pleasing to you or useful to you, you can set that up. Okay, if you're working on a number of different scrivenings and maybe pulling in different chapters from different parts of your project, which you may easily do, maybe you want to see the titles for these inline. And we can do that under View, Text Editing, and then Show Titles in Scrivenings. So if I click that, we can see that it gets the title from the chapter. And if I quickly wanted to get to the others, I can click here and click on Zari's chapter. So we see his highlighted in red, Lorelei's in blue. Now, if we're working with chapters or folders with a lot of subdocuments, we might want to show the titles for those as well. So if I go under View, Text Editing, see right now I have this checked, only show scrivening titles for folders. I can uncheck that and see the titles for all of them. So if I check that, now mine will be a little bit confusing because if I only have a single scene, I use the same description for each because I might be focused on one or the other, and so I always want that available. And it's only when I have a second scene that I get another title. Like over here, here's my first scene, there's my second scene with a different title. So let me just go up to that, click here, go up to Rylan. And so here I see the folder, and then here's the scene separately. And then if I go to the next scene, it just shows that one title. This doesn't really work in my use case. I'm often jumping around and just don't need that information because I have it available easily. But you might have an application where you want to see the titles. And keep in mind, this stuff doesn't show up when you compile. This is just showing this in this view because it has the data available, and Scrivener gives you the option to view it in line in your text editor. But don't worry that this is going to show up in your compile. It won't unless you want it to. Now, one more thing that might be useful to you is to show the invisibles. I hate having extra spaces at the end or leading tabs or spaces, and so sometimes you might want to see if they're there. So if you go under View, Text Editing, you can show invisibles. And in this case, it will put dots, tiny little dots for the spaces. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see one right here and all throughout. Paragraphs are this, backwards P, standard paragraph symbol. If you have a tab, it will show it as a arrow, an indent for that. And if you have multiple, it'll just put more on there. And if you have multiple paragraphs lined up, it will show each of them. So you won't see just blank lines, you'll have that paragraph symbol, so you know what's there. And other unviewable ASCII characters that don't normally show up in text will also be revealed. So if you have something odd going on in your layout, you might look at that show invisibles to see what's going on. And then let me show you one more thing. So right now, let me get rid of the invisibles first of all, those are annoying. So you can hide invisibles. And then look over on the right-hand side, I have different comments here. And so if I am going through my document, I might have a lot of markups for things that I put in. I might have had somebody else look at it, an editor or a fellow author actually make changes in Scrivener and add comments and give it back to me, in which case I could have a ton of different comments, and that can get in the way. Like if you're trying to write something and you see those constantly, and keep in mind, these can be gigantic. So I could select this whole thing, add a comment, And so as you're moving along through your manuscript, you might come across this and it's just kind of annoying. And if it's there, notice how up here my mouse pointer is this little text icon, but if I scroll down into that comment area, it changes to this little finger icon because it knows it's a comment. And so if I click on that, it will bring that up. I might actually have a ton of comments and I might be somewhere else in this scroll on the right-hand side here. And if I click on that, it will snap to that one. So if I'm down over here and then I come back up, click on it, it makes that one active. And so it'll snap me to that place in the list of comments. But while you're working on the manuscript, that might be annoying. So you can go under View Text Editing and then Hide Markup. So you click on that and then it goes away. The icon, oddly enough, still stays. So if you're looking at different things and you happen to stumble across something that makes it turn into this little, finger style icon instead of the text icon, that's what's happening. But it's not shown, and you can still edit in this area. You may have to just click above and then arrow down to get to the right place. You can't single click in here. You can double click, however. If I double click right here, I can get into that. But the first click just keeps the pointer where it is currently and wakens the comment in the comment list. But if you do double click, you can move wherever you want, and you can arrow inside of that as well. But if that's getting in your way, you can just hide the markups and then you can bring them back anytime. Just go back under View Text Editing and then Show Markup. In the end, decluttering can really help to unburden your mind and allow you to become more efficient and even creative. Scrivener is a very powerful writing tool, and the interface can seem complex. Sometimes there's no avoiding that, depending on your project and what stage you're currently at with it. But hopefully this gives you the tools you need to make your interface as simple and streamlined as possible. As always, if you found this talk useful, I hope you'll like and share with other writers and writer groups especially. That really helps to spread the word about the channel. I have a ton of videos I hope to tackle soon, including a deep dive into Scrivener's metadata features, a how-to on self-publishing in paperback format, and more. So be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss anything. I hope to see you in the next one. Until then, dream big, stay positive, and keep writing. Peace, everyone.